Commander ZYXTAL of the Viridian Republic clutched the communication console with his four-fingered hands, his blue-scaled face contorting in frustration. The holographic display before him showed the dire situation his fleet faced. 37 ships of varying sizes hung in the void of space, their hulls scarred and weapon systems failing. Behind them, growing larger by the hour, was the Crexian hegemony's war fleet, over 200 vessels of destruction that had been hunting them across 3 star systems. "Sir, the jump drives are still offline," reported Navigation Officer Quelm, her voice trembling through the translator unit. "The quantum cores took too much damage in the last engagement. We need at least 6 hours to repair them." ZYXTAL's amber eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. The Crexians would be within weapons range in 4 hours. His people, refugees from the outer colonies that the hegemony had already conquered, would be slaughtered. Women, children, elderly, nearly 40,000 souls packed into cargo holds and passenger compartments of ships never meant for such a journey. "What about the distress protocols?" he asked his communications chief. "Already transmitted on all standard frequencies, Commander. No response from any Galactic Alliance vessels. The nearest GA patrol is 16 hours away at best." Chief Communications Officer Tralvek paused, then added hesitantly, "There is one option, sir." ZYXTAL turned his attention to the younger officer. "Speak." "The emergency protocols allow for contact with non-aligned species in extreme circumstances. There's a developing world in this sector, 3rd planet from a yellow star. Early space age civilization. They're not part of the Alliance, but they're primitive," ZYXTAL finished. "What could they possibly offer against the Crexian war machine?" Tralvek's screen flickered as he pulled up the system data. "According to our long-range scouts, they call themselves humans. They've achieved basic FTL technology, have some orbital infrastructure, but nothing that could stand against even our lightest cruiser. However, the emergency protocols state that any spacefaring species can be contacted if no other options exist." The ship shuddered as another microfracture appeared in the hull plating. Time was running out. "Sir," Quelm called out, "Crexian scouts just dropped out of hyperspace. They've found us. Main fleet arrival in 3 hours, 57 minutes. ZYXTAL closed his eyes and made what he thought was a purely procedural decision. Send the distress call to the human homeworld. Full translation package. Mark it as an emergency contact under Protocol 77 Alpha. Transmitting now, sir, Tralvek confirmed. Standard distress message in their dominant languages. Should reach their planet in 14 minutes. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the occasional creak of stressed metal. Nobody expected anything to come of the transmission. It was merely following procedure, a desperate measure to ensure they had exhausted all options before the inevitable final battle. On Earth, deep within the NORAD facility in Cheyenne Mountain, a technician named Sarah Chen nearly choked on her coffee when her console erupted in alerts. "Colonel Morrison," she called out, her voice echoing across the communications center. "You need to see this, sir." Colonel James Morrison, a 30-year veteran of the Space Force, strode over to Chen's station. "What VE you got, Sergeant?" "Sir, we just received what appears to be a first contact signal. It's a distress call." Chen's hands flew over her keyboard, bringing up the decoded message on the main screen. "The translation software is working on it now, but the basic meaning is coming through. There's a fleet of refugee ships being pursued by hostile forces. They're requesting immediate assistance." Morrison felt his heart skip a beat. First contact protocols had been drilled into every Space Force officer for decades, but nobody had really expected to use them. "Are we sure this isn't some kind of hoax?" "Sir, the signal originated from outside the solar system. The encryption patterns and transmission methods are unlike anything in our databases. The power output required to reach Earth from that distance." Chen shook her head. "This is either genuine alien contact or the most elaborate hoax in human history using technology we don't possess." Within minutes, the communication had been forwarded to the Pentagon, the United Nations, and space agencies worldwide. But Morrison knew that by the time politicians and diplomats finished debating, it would be too late for whoever had sent the signal. "Chen, get me Admiral Rodriguez on the secure line," he ordered. "And start running calculations for our nearest available assets." Admiral Rodriguez, head of the United Earth Space Defense Force, listened to the briefing with growing amazement.
How long do they have, Colonel?
According to the message, hostile forces will reach them in under 4 hours.
The coordinates they provided put them approximately 37 light-years away. Our fastest ships can't reach them in time, Rodriguez said grimly.
The USS Endeavour and her battle group are conducting exercises near Proxima Centauri, but even with maximum warp, they're looking at 6 hours minimum.
Morrison paused.
Sir, with respect, I don't think time is our only concern here. According to the technical data in their transmission, these are incredibly advanced spacecraft. Their smallest vessel appears to be larger and more sophisticated than our entire fleet combined.
If they're being overpowered by an enemy force, then what exactly are we supposed to do against that enemy? Rodriguez finished.
I understand your concern, Colonel, but we can't simply ignore a distress call.
Especially not humanity's first contact with alien life. 30 minutes after the initial transmission was received, an emergency session of the UN Security Council was called. World leaders joined via holographic link as the translated message played in multiple languages. This is Commander ZYXTAL of the Viridian Republic Fleet. We are 37 civilian vessels carrying approximately 40,000 refugees from the outer colony worlds. We are being pursued by Krexian hegemony forces numbering over 200 warships. Our jump drives are disabled, and we cannot escape. We are requesting immediate assistance from any space-capable civilization in this sector. Our location is being transmitted with this message. Please respond if you can render aid.
The chamber was silent for several moments after the message ended.
The Secretary General, Maria Santos, spoke first. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing an unprecedented situation. Our xenological experts have confirmed that this transmission could not have been created with current Earth technology. We appear to be receiving a genuine request for help from an alien civilization. But, what can we realistically do? Asked the British Prime Minister.
Our space capabilities, while impressive by our standards, are clearly primitive compared to these beings. President Chen of the United States leaned forward.
That may be irrelevant. The fact is, someone is asking for our help. Our response to this situation will define humanity's first impression on the galactic stage. Assuming we can even reach them, added the Russian president.
Our fastest ships are already being prepared for deployment, interrupted Admiral Sarah Kim, speaking from the UN Space Command Center. The international fleet has been placed on high alert. We have 12 vessels that can make the journey, led by the UES Unity, our most advanced exploration ship. The Chinese representative raised a concern. Even if we can reach them, what assistance can we provide? Their message suggests they face a force of 200 warships. Our entire space fleet consists of 37 vessels, most of them research ships and orbital patrol craft.
Admiral Kim nodded grimly. You're correct in that we cannot match their firepower. However, there may be other ways to assist. Rescue operations, medical aid, technical support, or simply providing a temporary safe haven.
There's another consideration, added Dr. Elena Vasquez, the UN's chief xenobiologist, who had been hastily called in as a consultant.
This could be a test. These beings may be far more advanced than their message indicates.
How we respond could determine whether humanity is seen as worthy of contact with galactic civilization.
President Santos stood. I'm authorizing immediate deployment of available assets. This decision transcends national boundaries. This is humanity's response to our first contact scenario.
Back in space, Commander ZYXTAL watched his tactical display with growing despair. The Krexian scouts had been joined by advanced destroyers, and sensor readings showed the main fleet approaching fast.
Any response from the humans? He asked, though he already knew the answer.
Nothing yet, sir, Tralvek replied. Even if they intended to help, their primitive technology couldn't possibly. The communications console erupted in signal alerts.
Sir! Tralvek's voice cracked with excitement. We're receiving a response. Multiple transmissions from the human homeworld. On screen, ZYXTAL ordered, hardly daring to hope.
The main display filled with the image of a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. Behind her, ZYXTAL could see other humans working frantically at primitive but functional-looking equipment.
This is Admiral Sarah Kim of the United Earth Space Defense Force, the human said, her words automatically translated by the ship's computers. Commander ZYXTAL, we have received your distress call.
Please be advised that 12 vessels of the human fleet are en route to your position. Estimated arrival time is 4 hours and 37 minutes.
ZYXTAL's crew exchanged glances. The humans would arrive after the corrections.
The Admiral continued, "We understand our technology may seem primitive compared to your own, but we want you to know that humanity does not abandon those in need. We're coming to help, regardless of the odds. Please transmit detailed information about your technical requirements and the nature of the hostile force pursuing you."
For the first time in days, ZYXTAL felt something like hope stirring in his chest. Not because he believed these primitive aliens could defeat the Krexian war machine, but because they had answered the call. Against all logic and self-interest, they were coming. Tralvek, open a return channel. Full technical brief on our situation and the Krexian capabilities. He paused, then added, "and transmit our gratitude.
It appears that some species in this galaxy still understand honor." What none of them knew was that the human response was far more significant than a simple 12-ship rescue mission. Across Earth, emergency protocols were activating systems that had been dormant for decades. In shipyards orbiting Luna, automated manufacturing systems were coming online. Deep space monitoring stations were redirecting all sensor arrays toward the crisis coordinates. Most importantly, a message was being transmitted on frequencies that no alien civilization had ever monitored: the emergency networks that connected not just Earth's military forces, but the hidden defense installations scattered throughout human space, the private military corporations operating in the outer systems, the colonial militias, and even the notorious human mercenary fleets that operated beyond official oversight. The message was simple: first contact distress call received. All available units respond immediately to coordinates being transmitted. This is not a drill. Humanity's first impression on the galactic stage is at stake. What ZYXTAL thought was a response from one small, primitive world was actually a rallying cry that would echo across dozens of star systems where humans had quietly been expanding for decades, building a presence that the galaxy had never noticed. The Krexian hegemony was about to discover why no species in the galaxy had ever truly defeated humanity in warfare, not because humans were the strongest or most advanced, but because when one human called for help, every human in range answered. As the first Krexian destroyers moved into weapons range of the refugee fleet, sensor operators across human space began reporting the same phenomenon: ships were disappearing from their patrol routes, mining operations, and trading missions. Not destroyed or captured, simply gone, with farewell messages indicating they were responding to the call. Commander ZYXTAL watched his chronometer count down to what he assumed would be his final battle, unaware that he had accidentally initiated the largest military mobilization in human history. The first Krexian destroyer opened fire on the trailing Viridian transport ship, its crimson energy beams slicing through the vessel's rear shields like a hot knife through paper. Emergency klaxons wailed across Commander ZYXTAL's flagship as he watched 43 refugees die in the explosion that followed. "Return fire," he ordered, though he knew it was futile. The Viridian ships were cargo haulers and colony transports, never designed for combat. Their few defensive weapons were centuries old and barely functioning. "Sir, the human ships are still 2 hours out," Navigator Quelm reported, her voice steady despite the hopeless situation. "But we're detecting something strange on long-range sensors." ZYXTAL barely glanced at the display as another transport took critical damage. "What kind of strange?" "Hyperspace distortions. Multiple ones. Different signatures than the Krexian fleet." Quelm's voice took on a puzzled tone. "Sir, these signatures, they don't match any known species in the database." On the bridge of the Krexian flagship, War Leader Vortax smiled with satisfaction as he watched the primitive aliens' pathetic attempts at defense. The Viridians had been a thorn in the hegemony's side for too long, harboring dissidents and spreading their democratic ideologies to other species. Today, their resistance would end permanently. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, detecting hyperspace emergence signatures. Multiple contacts. Vortax's good mood evaporated. "Galactic Alliance vessels?" "Unknown, War Leader. The signatures don't match any known propulsion systems. They're strange." The first human ships dropped out of FTL drive with a flash of blue-white energy that made the Krexian sensors scream warnings. What emerged were vessels that looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen: angular, aggressive designs covered in weapon emplacements and sensor arrays, their hulls bearing strange symbols and markings. "This is Captain Maria Santos of the UES Retribution," came the transmission on all frequencies. Krexian vessels, you will immediately cease hostilities against the refugee fleet and withdraw from this system. War leader Vorthak studied the new arrivals with growing confusion. 12 ships, just as his intelligence had predicted. Primitive humans with their crude technology. But something was wrong with the sensor readings. Analysis, he barked at his tactical officer. Sir, the human vessels are heavily armed. Weapon signatures unlike anything in our databases. Hull composition appears to be some kind of advanced composite material. Their power output is. The officer paused, double-checking his readings. Sir, their smallest vessel is generating more power than one of our heavy cruisers. Vorthak's confidence wavered. Impossible. Our intelligence indicates these humans are a primitive species barely capable of interstellar travel. Perhaps our intelligence was wrong, his first officer suggested quietly. Captain Santos' voice crackled across the comm again. Krexian forces, this is your final warning. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Vorthak's pride overrode his caution. No primitive species would dare threaten the might of the hegemony. All ships, ignore the human vessels. Continue the attack on the Viridian fleet. If the humans interfere, destroy them. The response was immediate and devastating. The human ships moved with a precision and coordination that spoke of decades of combat experience. Their weapons, strange blue-white energy beams that seemed to cut through Krexian shields like they weren't there, began systematically dismantling the advanced destroyers. Impossible. Vorthak roared as he watched 3 of his ships explode in rapid succession. How are they penetrating our shields? His science officer, frantically working at his console, provided the answer. Sir, their weapons appear to operate on quantum frequencies that our shields aren't designed to stop. And, their targeting systems, they're achieving hit rates of 97% at maximum range. But, that wasn't the worst part. War leader, his communications officer called out, voice trembling. We're detecting more hyperspace signatures. Many more. The space around the battlefield began to light up with emergence flashes as more human ships arrived. Not 12 ships, dozens. Then, hundreds. Commander ZYXTAL stared in amazement as human vessels continued to appear around his fleet. Ships of every size and configuration, from massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in his experience to small, agile fighters that moved like living creatures through space. How many humans live on that planet? He whispered. Sir, Tralvek said in amazement, I'm receiving transmissions from the human vessels. They're not all from Earth. Some are identifying themselves as being from places called Mars, Luna, Titan, Europa. Sir, the humans have colonies throughout their solar system. And beyond. The tactical display was becoming impossible to read as more human ships continued to arrive. Worse, for the Krexians, these weren't just military vessels. Mining ships armed with industrial-grade plasma cutters that could slice through armor plating. Cargo haulers carrying massive railguns that launched steel slugs at relativistic speeds. Even what appeared to be civilian vessels had been hastily fitted with weapons. This is Captain Jennifer Chen of the mining vessel Asteroid Buster, came one transmission. Sorry we're late to the party. Had to detach from the asteroid belt, but we brought party favors. Her ship, a massive industrial platform, deployed weapon systems that made even the human military vessels look conservative. Corporate security fleet responding, announced another voice. Mars Colonial Defense Force en route. Belt Miners Union vessels forming up for attack run. War leader Vorthak watched his tactical display with growing horror as more and more human ships continued to arrive. What had started as a simple operation to eliminate some refugee aliens had turned into a nightmare. How many ships do they have? He demanded. Unknown, sir. Current count is over 400 vessels and still climbing. They're arriving from multiple vectors, suggesting a coordinated response across several star systems. That's impossible. Our intelligence indicated the humans were confined to a single world. His communications officer looked up from his console, face pale. Sir, I'm intercepting human communications. They're not just from one world. We're seeing transmissions from dozens of systems. Colony worlds, mining outposts, trading stations. Sir, the humans have been expanding across this entire sector, and somehow we never noticed. The truth was becoming clear to Vorthak. Humanity's expansion had been quiet, methodical, and deliberately under the radar. While the major galactic powers had been focused on each other, the humans had been slowly spreading across hundreds of systems, establishing mining operations, research stations, and colonies. They hadn't announced themselves because they hadn't felt the need to. Until now. Sir, his tactical officer reported, human fleet strength now exceeds 800 vessels. They've achieved complete tactical superiority. Recommend immediate withdrawal. Vortak's pride warred with his survival instinct. The hegemony had never retreated from a primitive species. But the evidence was undeniable, these humans were far from primitive. "This is Admiral Kim of the United Earth Space Defense Force," came a new transmission. "War Leader Vortak, you are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now and your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions. Continue fighting and we will defend the refugees by any means necessary." "How do they know my name?" Vortak whispered. His intelligence officer provided the disturbing answer. "Sir, they appear to have hacked our communications network. They're reading our internal transmissions in real time." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Human ships were now arriving faster than Vortak's sensors could count them. Massive industrial vessels that had been converted to weapons platforms, sleek military ships with technology that seemed decades ahead of Krexian capabilities, and swarms of fighters that moved with the precision of a hive mind. "Sir, detecting massive hyperspace signature," his sensor operator announced. Something big coming through. The largest ship Vortak had ever seen emerged from hyperspace, a massive station that had somehow been fitted with FTL drives. The designation painted on its hull read New Angeles Industrial Complex. "This is Administrator Rodriguez," came the transmission from the mobile station. "We brought manufacturing facilities and medical ships for the refugees. Also, enough firepower to glass a planet. Your choice how this goes." Commander ZYXTAL found himself laughing despite the dire situation. The humans had brought an entire industrial complex to the battle. Not just to fight, but to immediately begin helping the refugees. "Sir," Navigation Officer Quelm said wonderingly, "I'm reading over 1,200 human vessels now. And they're still coming." The human fleet had formed a protective sphere around the Viridian refugees, with the most heavily armed vessels facing outward toward the Krexian forces. But what impressed ZYXTAL most was the organization. Within minutes of arriving, human ships had established a command structure, divided into tactical groups, and begun coordinating their movements with military precision. "Tralvac, are you monitoring human communications?" "Yes, sir. It's remarkable. They're using encrypted channels, but our computers are starting to break the codes. Sir, they have protocols for this exact situation. Multiple contingencies, backup plans, supply lines already being established. It's like they've been preparing for this scenario for decades." What the Viridians didn't know was that humans had indeed been preparing for this scenario. Not specifically alien refugees, but any situation that required massive, coordinated response across multiple systems. Human military doctrine was built around rapid deployment and overwhelming force multiplication. Every human colony had defense forces. Every mining operation had security ships. Every trading vessel was required to mount at least minimal weapons. And all of them were connected by quantum communication networks that allowed for instant coordination across vast distances. When the call had gone out, it hadn't just reached 12 ships. It had reached every human installation within 50 light-years, and they had all responded. War Leader, Vortak's first officer said quietly, "We need to withdraw. Now. Before this gets worse." "Worse? How could this possibly get worse?" His answer came in the form of his communications officer, who looked up from his console with an expression of absolute terror. "Sir, I'm detecting quantum communication bursts being transmitted to coordinates throughout known space. The humans are calling for reinforcements." Vortak felt his blood turn to ice. "Reinforcements? From where?" "Unknown, sir. But the signal strength suggests they have assets scattered across the galaxy." "Sir, I think we've made a terrible mistake. The humans aren't a primitive species confined to one world. They're a galactic power that we somehow missed." Through the viewport, Vortak could see human ships continuing to arrive, their formation growing tighter and more organized by the minute. What had started as what he thought would be an easy massacre had turned into facing the largest fleet he had ever seen.
And, somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrifying thought was taking root. If the humans had been this careful about hiding their true capabilities, what else didn't the galaxy know about them?
The answer to that question was about to arrive in the form of the largest human fleet ever assembled, as word of the first contact situation spread through quantum networks to every human installation in known space. Deep in the Centauri Research Complex, Dr. Elizabeth Harper received the priority alert while working late in her xenobiology lab. The message was brief but earth-shaking: first contact confirmed. Refugee situation. All available assets respond immediately. She stared at the screen for several seconds, then activated her emergency protocols. Within minutes, every research vessel, survey ship, and exploration platform under her command was being fitted with whatever weapons the complex could manufacture on short notice.
"This is Control to all Centauri research vessels," she broadcast. "Emergency deployment authorized. Destination coordinates are being transmitted now.
This is not a drill, we have first contact with alien life, and they need our help." The response was immediate. Across 3 star systems, human ships began altering course toward the crisis zone. But these weren't military vessels, they were scientists, researchers, explorers, and civilians who had dedicated their lives to understanding the universe. And they were furious that someone was trying to commit genocide on humanity's first day in galactic politics. Back at the battle site, War Leader Vorthak was discovering that the situation could indeed get worse. Much worse. "Sir," his sensor operator announced with barely controlled panic, "massive quantum displacement detected.
Something extremely large approaching our position."
What emerged from hyperspace defied comprehension. The human vessel was over 30 kilometers long, its hull bristling with weapon emplacements, sensor arrays, and docking bays. The designation painted along its side read UHS Unconquerable, and, underneath it, in smaller text that Vorthak's translators struggled with, Seoul Deep Space Command, when diplomacy fails. "This is Fleet Admiral Morrison of the Seoul Deep Space Command," the transmission began, and, even through the translator, Vorthak could hear the steel in the human's voice. "War Leader Vorthak of the Krexian Hegemony, you have exactly 30 seconds to explain why you're attacking civilian refugees in my sector of space."
Vorthak's confusion was complete. "Your sector?
This is neutral space." Was neutral space, Admiral Morrison corrected. As of 14 minutes ago, the United Earth Council voted to establish a humanitarian protection zone around the refugee fleet.
Any hostile action against civilians in this zone constitutes an act of war against humanity.
The massive human ship began deploying smaller vessels, hundreds of them, like a swarm of deadly insects. But what made Vorthak's blood run cold was the casual way the Admiral had said "my sector."
How long had the humans been operating out here? How much space did they consider theirs? "Impossible," Vorthak muttered. "Our intelligence shows no human presence in this region." Admiral Morrison's laugh was cold. "Your intelligence is 40 years out of date.
We've been quietly establishing presence throughout this sector since before your hegemony existed. We just didn't see any reason to announce ourselves.
Until now." Commander ZYX Tal watched in amazement as the human fleet continued to grow.
The massive command ship had been joined by what appeared to be an entire mobile infrastructure, hospital ships, supply vessels, mobile shipyards, and even what looked like luxury passenger liners that had been hastily converted into troop transports. "Sir," Tralvek reported, his voice filled with wonder, "I'm receiving a direct communication from the humans.
They're requesting permission to begin immediate medical assistance to our wounded." "Granted," ZYX Tal said immediately.
His people were dying, and if the humans could help, he would accept aid from anyone.
The response was swift and professional.
Human medical ships docked with damaged Viridian vessels, and teams of medics began treating the wounded. But what impressed ZYX Tal most was the efficiency. The humans had clearly studied Viridian biology during the flight here and had prepared appropriate medical supplies. "Commander," Dr. Sarah Kim, the human chief medical officer, said as she materialized on his bridge via hologram, "we've established triage centers on 3 of our hospital ships. Our analysis indicates we can treat most of your injured, but we'll need to understand more about your biology."
"Are you willing to share medical data?"
"Of course," ZYX Tal replied. "But how did you prepare for our physiology?"
Dr. Kim smiled. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. academic papers, medical journals, scientific conferences.
We've built extensive databases on known species, just in case we ever needed to provide assistance.
Today, we need them.
The casual revelation that humans had been quietly observing galactic civilization for decades sent another chill through the Crexian ranks.
If they had been watching and learning, what else had they prepared for?
The answer came in the form of Captain Elena Vasquez, commander of the Human Psychological Operations Division. War leader Vorthak, her transmission began. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about the situation you're facing. Her image appeared on the main screen of the Crexian flagship, a middle-aged human woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through him. You came here expecting to massacre 40,000 unarmed refugees, she continued. Instead, you're now facing over 1,500 human vessels, with more arriving every hour.
But that's not your real problem. What is my real problem? Vorthak found himself asking despite his better judgment. Your real problem is that you've just committed an act of aggression against a refugee fleet under the protection of humanity. And humans have very long memories when it comes to genocide. Captain Vasquez's expression remained calm, but her words carried the weight of absolute certainty.
Every major galactic power is monitoring this situation. The Galactic Alliance, the Trade Federation, the Independent Systems Coalition, they're all watching to see how this plays out. She gestured to something off-screen, and the tactical display on Vorthak's ship updated with new information. You see, we've been in contact with the galactic community for longer than you know.
Quiet contact, unofficial channels, but contact nonetheless. And, right now, representatives from 17 major powers are requesting permission to observe how humanity handles its first official crisis. The implications hit Vorthak like a physical blow. This wasn't just a rescue mission, it was humanity's debut on the galactic stage, and they were making sure everyone was watching.
Furthermore, Captain Vasquez continued, we've been analyzing Crexian military doctrine for the past 6 hours.
Your standard operating procedures, tactical preferences, command structure.
We know exactly how you fight, and we've developed countermeasures for every strategy in your playbook.
That's impossible, Vorthak protested. You've never fought Crexian forces before.
No, but we've been fighting each other for thousands of years, Vasquez replied.
Humans wrote the book on warfare, then rewrote it, then translated it into 17 languages and taught it at universities. Your tactics are actually quite similar to strategies we discarded centuries ago.
To prove her point, the human fleet began a complex maneuver that should have been impossible to coordinate across so many vessels. Ships moved in perfect synchronization, creating overlapping fields of fire that left no escape routes for the Crexian forces while simultaneously protecting the refugee fleet.
How? Vorthak whispered. His tactical officer provided the answer.
Sir, they're using quantum-entangled communication networks. Every ship is in instantaneous contact with every other ship.
They're operating as a single entity with 1,500 components.
The demonstration was as beautiful as it was terrifying. The humans weren't just technologically advanced, they were operating at a level of coordination that suggested centuries of military development and experience. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the human xenosociologist, provided another piece of the puzzle when she addressed Commander ZYXTAL directly.
Commander, we've been analyzing the situation that led to your people becoming refugees.
The Crexian hegemony has been systematically conquering and subjugating worlds throughout this sector, always targeting democratic societies and free governments.
ZYXTAL nodded grimly.
They claim to be bringing order to chaos, but they destroy any society that doesn't conform to their authoritarian model. We know, Dr. Rodriguez said quietly.
We've been watching it happen for decades. And we've been preparing.
She activated a holographic display that showed star charts spanning dozens of systems. Every world the Crexians have targeted, every government they've overthrown, every population they've enslaved, we've been documenting it all. And we've been quietly making contact with resistance movements, providing technical assistance, medical supplies, and intelligence.
The revelation stunned both ZYXTAL and Vorthak.
The humans hadn't just been observers, they had been actively working against Crexian expansion for years. You see, Dr. Rodriguez continued, humans have a particular hatred for tyranny. It's built into our culture, our history, our very nature. When we learned about the Crexian hegemony's activities, we couldn't just stand by and watch.
Admiral Morrison's voice cut through the communication channels. War Leader Vortak, you now have a choice. You can order your fleet to withdraw immediately and face only the diplomatic consequences of attacking refugees. Or you can continue this fight and discover exactly what 1,500 human warships can do to your fleet. And if we withdraw? Vortak asked, though he already knew he had no real choice.
You return to Krexian space with a message for your hegemony, Morrison replied.
This sector is now under human protection. Any further aggression against civilian populations will result in direct intervention by human forces. You're declaring war on the hegemony? Vortak asked in amazement. We're declaring protection for anyone who needs it, Morrison corrected. The hegemony is welcome to exist peacefully within its current borders.
But the expansion stops here. As if to emphasize the point, the space around the battlefield lit up with more hyperspace signatures. This time, the arriving ships were massive mobile space stations, factory complexes, and what appeared to be entire colony platforms that had been fitted with weapons and propulsion systems. Sir, Vortak's communications officer reported, we're receiving transmissions from human installations across the galaxy. They're establishing permanent bases throughout this sector.
This isn't just a rescue mission, it's a full-scale colonization effort. The truth was even more remarkable than that.
The humans hadn't just responded to the distress call, they had used it as an excuse to finally reveal their true presence in galactic space. For decades, they had been quietly expanding, learning, and preparing. The refugee crisis had simply provided the perfect opportunity to announce themselves as a major galactic power. War Leader, his first officer said quietly, we need to withdraw.
Now.
Before they decide to make an example of us.
Vortak looked at the tactical display one more time.
Over 2,000 human ships now surrounded his force, with more 3 months after the Altair incident, as historians were already calling it, the galaxy had begun to reshape itself around humanity's unexpected emergence as a major power. Haven Station had grown from a hastily assembled outpost into a bustling hub of diplomatic activity, with representatives from over 30 species maintaining permanent missions there.
Ambassador Elena Martinez, humanity's first official galactic diplomat, stood in the main observation deck of Haven Station, watching as another refugee convoy arrived under human escort.
These were Zilani survivors from the Outer Rim, fleeing systematic extermination by the Korvaxi Empire. Like the Viridians before them, they had sent out a desperate distress call, and, like before, humanity had answered. Ambassador, her aide, Lieutenant Commander Park, approached with a datapad.
The morning briefings are ready. We have some interesting developments. Martinez nodded, her eyes still on the refugee ships being guided to safety by human escorts.
Each convoy brought new stories of oppression, new evidence of the galaxy's darker nature, and new challenges for humanity's rapidly expanding role as protector of the innocent.
What's our count now? She asked.
137,000 refugees under human protection across 15 different species, Park replied. And we're receiving an average of 4 new distress calls per week. The numbers were staggering, but what impressed Martinez most was how humanity had risen to meet the challenge. Across human space, industrial complexes were working overtime to produce refugee shelters, medical supplies, and the infrastructure needed to support the growing humanitarian mission.
Any word from the Galactic Alliance Council? Martinez asked as they walked toward the briefing room.
That's where things get interesting, Park said with a slight smile.
The Alliance has formally invited humanity to join as a full member.
Skip the usual probationary period, skip the cultural integration requirements, straight to full membership with voting rights and seat on the Security Council.
Martinez paused. That's unprecedented.
Apparently, saving the lives of nearly 250,000 beings in 3 months makes quite an impression. They've also offered us our choice of committee assignments and are requesting that we take the lead on establishing new refugee protection protocols.
The irony wasn't lost on Martinez. 3 months ago, the galaxy hadn't even known humans existed. Now they were being asked to help write galactic law.
The briefing room was filled with representatives from various human departments, military, scientific, economic, and cultural affairs. The complexity of managing humanity's galactic presence had grown exponentially, requiring expertise from every field of human knowledge. General Patricia Williams, the military liaison, was first to present. Current status of our protection fleets: we have permanently stationed task forces in 12 systems, mobile response teams covering 37 sectors, and rapid deployment forces on standby at all major human installations.
Response time to any distress call in our area of responsibility is now under 6 hours. Dr. James Chen, the science advisor, followed. Cultural analysis of the species we've encountered reveals some concerning patterns. Of the 43 species we've made contact with, 31 have histories of being conquered or subjugated by larger powers. Only 12 have maintained continuous independence, and 8 of those are asking for protection agreements. Martinez nodded. Which suggests the galaxy is dominated by a relatively small number of aggressive powers preying on smaller civilizations. Exactly. And our intervention in the Altair incident has triggered a chain reaction. Subjugated populations across the galaxy are beginning to resist their oppressors, believing that human protection might be available. Economic advisor Sarah Kim presented the next challenge. The cost of maintaining our current humanitarian operations is significant, but manageable. However, if we continue to expand at the current rate, we'll need to increase our industrial capacity by 300% within the next 2 years. Can we do it? Martinez asked. We can, but it will require a complete restructuring of human industry. Every manufacturing facility, every mining operation, every research complex will need to contribute to the effort. We're essentially transforming human civilization into a galactic-scale humanitarian organization. The weight of that statement settled over the room. Humanity was changing, evolving in response to the needs they had discovered in the galaxy around them. Dr. Lisa Park, the xenopsychologist, provided perhaps the most crucial insight. We've completed preliminary psychological profiles of the major galactic powers. The Crexian hegemony, the Corvaxi Empire, the Dominion of Souls, they all share certain characteristics. They view conquest as natural, subjugation as efficient, and resistance as a character flaw to be eliminated. And how do they view us? Martinez asked. That's where it gets interesting. They don't understand us at all. Our willingness to sacrifice resources to help strangers makes no sense to them. They keep looking for our hidden agenda, the secret benefit we're gaining from protecting refugees. Because they can't conceive of altruism as a motive? Not altruism on this scale, no. They understand protecting family, tribe, even species. But protecting random strangers at significant cost to yourself? That's completely outside their worldview. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the station's command center. Ambassador Martinez, priority message incoming from Admiral Morrison's flagship. The Admiral's image appeared on the main screen, his expression grim. Ambassador, we have a situation developing in the Kepler system. The Dominion of Souls has just launched a full-scale invasion of the Thylaurian Republic. Estimated civilian casualties if the invasion succeeds, 15 million. Martinez felt her heart sink. The Thylaurians were one of the species that had requested protection agreements, but the paperwork was still being processed through alliance channels. Do we have assets in range? She asked. Negative. Our nearest task force is 8 hours away. By the time we arrive, the orbital bombardment will be complete. Options? We have one shot. The UHS Defiant is conducting deep space maneuvers in the adjacent system. They could reach Thylaurian space in 90 minutes, but it's a single ship against an entire invasion fleet. Martinez made the decision that would define humanity's role in galactic politics for the next century. Send them in. Full authorization for whatever action they deem necessary to protect civilian populations. Admiral Morrison nodded grimly. Understood. I should warn you, Captain Rodriguez of the Defiant is known for creative interpretations of engagement rules. Then, she's perfect for the job. Captain Maria Rodriguez of the UHS Defiant was indeed perfect for the job, though perhaps not in the way her superiors intended. When she received the orders to intervene in the Thylaurian situation, she was conducting weapons tests on her ship's new experimental systems. Helm, set course for Thylaurian space, maximum velocity, she ordered. Communications, get me tactical data on the Dominion fleet. Captain, her tactical officer reported, we're looking at 47 Dominion vessels, including 3 heavy dreadnoughts. They've already begun orbital bombardment of the major cities. Rodriguez studied the tactical display, then smiled in a way that made her crew slightly nervous. Engine room, I need you to push the quantum drive past safety limits. We're going to arrive very fast and very angry. Captain, the experimental weapons haven't been fully tested. Today seems like a good day to test them, Rodriguez interrupted.
Ready the quantum disruptor array and the temporal displacement cannons. We're going to give the Dominion a demonstration of what happens when you murder innocent civilians in human space. The UHS Defiant dropped out of hyperspace directly in the middle of the Dominion fleet, its experimental weapon systems charging with energy signatures that made enemy sensors scream warnings. Dominion vessels, this is Captain Rodriguez of the United Human Systems ship Defiant, she broadcast on all frequencies. You have 30 seconds to cease bombardment of civilian targets and withdraw from this system. The response was predictable. The Dominion commander, Warcast Supreme Vortek, laughed over the communication channel. A single human ship? You will watch your precious Thylorians burn, then join them in death. Wrong answer, Rodriguez said calmly. All weapons, fire. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. The quantum disruptor array created localized spacetime distortions that simply deleted sections of enemy ships from reality. The temporal displacement cannons aged enemy hulls by thousands of years in seconds, turning advanced warships into cosmic dust. Within 3 minutes, half the Dominion fleet had been destroyed or disabled, and the survivors were desperately trying to escape the impossible human ship that was cutting through their forces like they were made of paper. Impossible! Vortek screamed over the communications. No single ship could have this much firepower. You're right, Rodriguez replied. One ship couldn't. But this ship has the combined technological achievements of every human research facility, the weapons created by every human military contractor, and the determination of every human who refuses to stand by while innocents die. She paused to destroy 2 more Dominion cruisers with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Besides, you made one critical error in your tactical assessment. What error? Vortek demanded. You assumed I was alone. Space around the Thylorian system lit up with hyperspace emergence signatures as the rest of humanity's rapid response fleet arrived. Ships appeared from multiple vectors, having used the Defiant's position as a quantum beacon for instantaneous travel across vast distances. This is Admiral Chen of the 2nd Human Humanitarian Fleet, came the broadcast from the newly arrived flagship. Dominion forces, you are now surrounded by 67 human vessels. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. The battle was over before it truly began. The Dominion fleet, already decimated by the Defiant's impossible weapons, surrendered rather than face complete annihilation. But the real shock came 12 hours later, when long-range sensors detected massive fleet movements throughout Dominion space. Every available ship was being recalled to defend their core worlds. Sir, the Thylorian planetary governor said to Admiral Chen during the post-battle briefing, our intelligence suggests the Dominion is preparing for full-scale war against humanity. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. Let them come. What they don't understand is that humanity doesn't fight wars the way other species do. How do we fight differently? Everyone else in the galaxy fights to conquer territory or subjugate populations. Humans fight to protect our principles. And there's no force in the universe more dangerous than someone fighting to protect what they believe in. As news of the Thylorian rescue spread across the galaxy, reactions were swift and decisive. 23 species formally requested protection agreements with humanity. 7 minor powers offered military alliances. And 3 major galactic empires began mobilizing their fleets. The galaxy was choosing sides, and humanity found itself at the center of a conflict they had never sought but were fully prepared to fight. Because if there was one thing that united every human across known space, from the miners of the asteroid belt to the researchers of the outer colonies, it was the absolute refusal to allow genocide to happen on their watch. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to face a species that considered the protection of innocent life to be worth any sacrifice. 6 months after the Thylorian incident, the war that nobody wanted but everyone saw coming finally began. The tripartite alliance of the Crexian hegemony, Corvaxi Empire, and Dominion of Souls had spent months coordinating their forces, planning what they called the final solution to the human problem. Fleet Admiral Sarah Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Eternal Vigilance, humanity's new flagship and the largest mobile weapons platform ever constructed. Around her, the combined human defense fleet numbered over 4,000 vessels, but they were about to face nearly 10,000 enemy ships in what would become known as the Battle of the Seven Suns. Admiral, Communications Officer Chen reported, were receiving the final diplomatic transmission from the Tripartite Alliance. Put it through, Morrison ordered. The holographic display showed 3 alien leaders: War Leader Kregstar of the Hegemony, Emperor Vortek of the Korvaxi, and Supreme Caste Overlord Thane of the Dominion. "Humans," Kregstar began, "you have interfered with the natural order of the galaxy for the last time. Your protection of inferior species ends today."
Emperor Vortek continued the joint statement. "We offer you one final opportunity for survival.
Withdraw to your original system, cease all humanitarian operations, and surrender the refugees under your protection for proper processing."
Supreme Caste Overlord Thane finished with barely contained fury. "Refuse, and every human installation in known space will be reduced to atomic dust."
Admiral Morrison looked at each of the alien leaders in turn, then smiled with the cold confidence of someone who had spent months preparing for exactly this moment. "Gentlemen," she began, "6 months ago, one of our alien friends accidentally sent us a distress call. In response, humanity revealed itself to the galaxy not as conquerors, but as protectors. Since then, you've given us nothing but reasons to regret that decision." She activated a tactical display showing the positions of both fleets. "You see massive formations of warships and think you're looking at a military force.
You're not.
You're looking at the accumulated determination of every human who has ever heard a cry for help and answered it. You're facing a species that considers the protection of innocent life to be our highest calling." The alien leaders exchanged glances, clearly expecting threats of retaliation or desperate pleas for peace. Instead, Admiral Morrison continued with calm certainty. "So here's our counteroffer: withdraw immediately to your original borders, release all conquered populations under your control, and submit to galactic war crimes tribunals for the genocide you've committed. Do this, and you'll be allowed to exist peacefully within your reduced territories."
"And if we refuse?" Kregstar snarled.
"Then, you'll discover why no species in galactic history has ever truly defeated humanity in a fight. Not because we're the strongest, though we are, and not because we're the smartest, though we might be, but because when you threaten innocence, you're not just fighting our military. You're fighting our entire civilization." She gestured to something off-screen.
"Computer, display current human fleet positions throughout known space."
The tactical display expanded to show not just the local battle area, but the entire galactic sector.
Red dots representing human ships appeared across hundreds of systems, far more than anyone had imagined possible.
Every mining operation, every research station, every colonial outpost, every merchant vessel, they're all armed, they're all crewed by beings who understand what's at stake, and they're all under orders to protect refugee populations by any means necessary.
Emperor Vortek leaned forward. "You're bluffing.
No species could have expanded so far without being detected." "We didn't expand," Admiral Morrison corrected.
"We networked. Every human facility is connected by quantum communication links to every other human facility.
When one of us calls for help, all of us respond.
When one of us is threatened, all of us fight back." Supreme Caste Overlord Thane's confidence was beginning to waver. "Even if that's true, you cannot match our combined numbers." Admiral Morrison's smile turned predatory. "You're right. We can't match your numbers." She paused. "We can exceed them."
The space around the battlefield began to light up with hyperspace signatures as human reinforcements arrived. Not hundreds of ships, but thousands. Industrial platforms converted to weapons platforms, research vessels bristling with experimental weapons, colony ships that had been transformed into mobile fortresses.
"This is Captain Rodriguez of the science vessel Curiosity," came one transmission.
"We finished retrofitting our gravity manipulation equipment for combat applications.
Ready to demonstrate what happens when you weaponize a black hole." "Mining Guild Omega 7 reporting for duty," announced another voice.
"We brought industrial plasma cutters, asteroid movers, and extremely bad attitudes toward anyone who hurts innocent people."
"Colonial Defense Force Alpha through Zeta standing by," called a third.
"We've got farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and retirees who all happen to be very good shots and very angry about genocide."
The alien fleet, which had seemed overwhelmingly large moments before, was now outnumbered 3-1 by a force that defied every expectation of what a military should look like.
"Impossible," Kregstar whispered. "No," Admiral Morrison replied.
"Inevitable.
You made the fundamental error that every tyrant in history has made. You assumed that beings who choose to help others are weak. You never considered that they might also choose to fight for others. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration of what happened when an entire civilization decided to go to war.
Human weapons that had been developed in university laboratories tore through enemy shields like they were made of paper. Mining equipment designed to crack asteroids simply deleted enemy ships from existence. Gravity manipulators that had been built to move planets began creating localized singularities that swallowed entire squadrons. But the most devastating weapons were the ones nobody saw coming. This is Dr. Sarah Kim of the biomedical research vessel Hippocrates, came a calm voice over the communications. We've just released a cloud of medical nanobots designed to repair damaged life support systems. Unfortunately, they seem to be malfunctioning and are instead upgrading enemy atmospheric processors to produce a mild sedative gas. Enemy crews should be falling asleep in about 3 minutes. Across the battlefield, tripartite alliance ships began going dark as their crews simply fell asleep at their stations, victims of weapons so advanced that they didn't even cause harm, they just made continued fighting impossible. Psychological Warfare Division reporting, announced another voice. We've hacked enemy communication networks and are now broadcasting therapeutic counseling sessions designed to help enemy crews work through their obviously deep-seated issues with violence and aggression. Early reports suggest we're causing several existential crises and at least 47 cases of spontaneous pacifism. The battle, if it could still be called that, lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the combined tripartite alliance fleet had been completely disabled without a single crew member being killed. Instead, they found themselves prisoners of a species that treated even their enemies with more compassion than they had ever shown to innocent civilians. War leader Krekstar found himself standing in the medical bay of a human ship, being treated for injuries he had received when his flagship's artificial gravity had been adjusted to create a very uncomfortable but non-lethal crash landing experience. I don't understand, he said to the human doctor treating his wounds. We came here to destroy you. Why are you helping me? Dr. Martinez, the same Elena Martinez who had started as humanity's first galactic diplomat and had since been cross-trained in battlefield medicine, looked up from her work. Because that's what humans do, she said simply. We help. Even when, especially when, the beings we're helping don't deserve it. But, we're your enemies. You were our enemies. Now you're our patients. Tomorrow, if you're smart, you'll be our neighbors living peacefully within your original borders. She finished treating his wounds and stepped back. The choice is yours. Across the galaxy, the news of the Battle of the Seven Suns spread faster than light through quantum communication networks. The three most aggressive powers in known space had been defeated not by superior violence, but by superior compassion backed by overwhelming technological advantage. The aftermath was swift and decisive. 17 species that had been subjugated by the Tripartite Alliance declared independence, knowing that human protection was available if needed. The Galactic Alliance immediately voted to restructure its charter around principles of humanitarian intervention and species self-determination. 36 minor powers requested formal alliance agreements with humanity. But, perhaps most importantly, refugee camps throughout human space began to empty as displaced populations were able to return to their homeworlds, now free from the threat of reconquest. Commander Zyxtal, the Viridian whose accidental distress call had started it all, stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, watching as the last of his people departed for their newly liberated homeworld. Do you regret it? He asked Admiral Morrison, who had come to see them off. Regret what? Answering our call. It turned your entire civilization upside down, forced you to reveal yourselves to the galaxy, and ultimately led to you having to fight a war. Admiral Morrison smiled. Commander, 6 months ago, humanity was a small, isolated species with big dreams and limited reach. Today, we're a galactic power with the infrastructure to protect innocent life throughout known space. We've made friends with dozens of species, helped liberate millions of beings from oppression, and established principles of humanitarian intervention that will protect generations of future refugees. She gestured to the ships departing for Viridian space. All because one alien commander was brave enough to ask for help, and humanity was brave enough to answer. No, Commander, I don't regret a single moment of it. As the Viridian convoy departed for home, Admiral Morrison received a priority message from Earth. The content was simple but momentous. The United Nations had voted to establish the Department of Galactic Humanitarian Affairs, with an unlimited budget and a mandate to ensure that no being in known space would ever again face genocide without protection. The message concluded with a single line that would become humanity's unofficial motto in galactic affairs: when someone calls for help, we answer.
And, across the galaxy, on worlds that had never heard of Earth or humans, that promise was already being put to the test as new distress calls were being transmitted into space, carrying the desperate hope that somewhere among the stars, someone was still listening. They were. Humanity had entered the galactic stage accidentally, through a simple act of compassion. But they would remain there permanently, as the guardians of those who could not guard themselves, the protectors of those who had no protection, and the answer to every cry for help that echoed through the darkness between the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly what humanity had intended.